Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ajax Public Library's program, Adulting Healthy Relationships, presented in partnership with Carea Community Health Centre. I'm Julia Campbell, and I'm the Adult Services Librarian at the Ajax Library. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today's program, Amy Nagel. Amy is a health promoter at Carea Community Health Centre in Ajax, where she provides community health education, individual support, and is involved in community projects such as the Durham Pride Prom and the Gender Journeys program. She has been promoting health and wellness in the community for 20 years, including work with youth and young adults, seniors, the 2S LGBTQI community, and newcomers. Amy holds a degree in psychology from the University of British Columbia. We are very lucky to have her with us today. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Amy to begin her presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Nagel, and as you heard, I'm a health promoter at Carea Community Health Centre, which is a health center and not-for-profit organization serving Durham region, especially the cities in South Durham. And we provide lots of holistic, non-judgmental, free, welcoming programs. So definitely check out our website at careachc.ca. So that's CAREA.ca for more information about our free programs. And today will be talking about healthy relationships. So I'm so happy to be here, and I'm going to be sharing some slides. I'm going to be showing some short YouTube videos, and that's going to be what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides here. Sorry, one moment, bear with me. Okay. I like to call this presentation Meet Me Halfway. It seems like a good theme for what we're talking about today. And a little bit about relationships. So we have so many different types of relationships in our lives. Often when we're talking about healthy relationships, we're thinking about partner relationships, whether that's with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a spouse or some other type of partner. And I'm just going to ask you today to think about relationships in terms of other types of relationships that we have too, like friendships. At our center, we hear some stories about unhealthy friendships, and we should have high standards for having healthy friendships as well, in terms of thinking of other peer relationships, family relationships as well, which can be challenging and complicated in their own way. So we're going to think about healthy relationships, and the themes that we talk about today is applying to all types of relationships that we might have in our lives. And through these relationships that we have in our life, we become who we are. We learn about ourselves, and it's part of growing up, and it's a lifelong process for us to learn how to navigate our relationships in a healthy way. And today, we're going to be talking a little bit also about things that we can do to build healthier relationships for ourselves, and also what to look out for. And I think from here, I might actually show, I'm going to show a video clip just after we look at our first slide here, which is about what a healthy relationship looks like, or what we might see in a person in a healthy relationship. So what some of those qualities are, some of those signs that we might see. So in a healthy relationship, you talk about your feelings. So that seems pretty basic, but I think that we could probably all agree there are times or situations where it can be really challenging to talk about our feelings in our relationships. I think sometimes in our culture, we sort of get the message that it's a sign of weakness to talk about our feelings. We feel vulnerable, like we're putting all of our cards on the table, and we're not really sure sometimes what the consequences will be, or how that person will react. We might be worried about rejection. And I would ask you to think about some of the really great things that we can get out of talking about our feelings in our relationship. What some of the benefits would be, what the payoff could be if we just took that risk, put ourselves out there a little bit and talked about our feelings. So some of those reasons we might want to do that would be to avoid and deal with conflict. So it can be really hard, or if not impossible, to resolve conflict without good communication. Um, Also, it's important to talk about our feelings so that we can let the person know what we want and need out of that relationship. We're not mind readers. I'm not going to just know how we feel and the types of things that we want from them. Also, it's important because it allows us to let people know the things that we're comfortable with and not comfortable with. So that's how we communicate about our limits, and that's how we set boundaries in our relationships. But how we control what happens to us in our relationships. So those are some of the reasons that that's important. You also respect other person's friends and activities. So we don't enter into a relationship expecting to change who that person hangs around with or spends their time with, or the types of things that they want to do. We respect those things, even if they're different from the things that we do, um, and embrace those different interests. It's important and healthy in a relationship for the person to have their own friends and activities. You respect differences in the other person. So appreciating those things that make them different and unique from you, and encouraging and embracing those differences. You state differences of opinion. So in a healthy relationship, it's okay to say how you feel. And in fact, you feel safe doing that. And you encourage the other person to do the same, even if you don't agree. And both people have equal say in the relationship. So it's not always one person getting to say what's going to happen and the other person going along with it. Both people have a chance to say what they want to do or how they feel. And when there is a disagreement or a conflict, you figure out a solution that's good for both of you. It's not always just what's good for one person, not always one person just caving and letting the other person have what they want. It's compromise, negotiation, and finding some common ground so that both people can feel good and feel satisfied in that situation. So that is a bit about what a healthy relationship looks like. Now I'm going to show a short YouTube video. It's from Psych to Go. I actually quite like the videos from Psych to Go. And this video more so is geared towards partner relationships, but I think we can take something away from it in terms of our other relationships as well. A little bit long, but I think it's worth it. It covers some of the things that I just talked about and more. So I'm just going to switch here to sharing this other window. Once again, just bear with me for a moment.
Many of us want to be in happy and meaningful relationships. But nowadays, in a dating scene plagued with superficiality and an abundance of
Just bear with me for a moment.
choice, making a relationship long-term while staying sane is much easier said than done. The initial spark is great, but it takes a lot more than attraction to sustain a relationship. What are some ways we can keep a healthy relationship and ensure longevity with our partners, you may ask? Here are 12 signs you are in a healthy relationship. 1. You communicate openly. A great relationship starts with transparency. Do you feel like you can communicate about anything with your partner, from personal needs to taboo topics? Do the both of you take the time to listen and empathize with each other? Good communication means using assertive techniques, which includes welcoming body language, concentrative listening, and respectful language. 2. You argue. This might sound strange, but arguing sometimes is actually healthy in a relationship. Otherwise, you're probably just bottling up your feelings and letting them turn into resentment. Couples who communicate well can argue effectively. Both parties can state their opinions while trying to understand where the other person is coming from. They also know when to apologize when they are wrong. This point, however, shouldn't be confused with destructive fighting, in which couples use aggressive behavior and language to hurt each other when they disagree about an issue. 3. You keep relationship details private. It's normal to turn to close friends and family for relationship advice when you run into conflict with your partner. But making your problems public on social media is passive-aggressive and can damage the trust you've built with them. Everyone needs a sense of privacy to feel safe, including relationships. 4. You don't hold grudges. The more you get to know your partner, the more you may get on each other's nerves, which is normal. We all get a little agitated from time to time and say and do things we don't mean that can upset our partners. But holding a grudge even after they apologize sincerely can hurt your relationship in the long run. Be sure to talk things out instead when you're upset and learn to let go. 5. You have realistic expectations. The perfect partner doesn't exist. It takes a lot of work to keep a relationship going. Healthy couples understand that the key to a long-lasting relationship is commitment, open communication, and compromise. 6. You take time and space for yourself. Being in a healthy relationship doesn't mean you're glued at the hip. It means you can have separate lives, interests, and friends, and maintain your own sense of individuality without fearing that your partner is going to be jealous or resentful. Having a life outside of a relationship is essential. 7. You trust each other. Healthy couples can spend time away from each other without worrying about their whereabouts or who they're with. Stalking a partner on social media and asking them for constant updates, however, are signs of trust issues or codependency. Trust means respecting your partner's decisions and feeling secure. 8. You enjoy spending time together. Whether that means dinner dates or cuddling on the couch, you enjoy spending time with your partner no matter what. A healthy relationship involves taking time out of your busy schedule to connect with your partner. It's not just an obligation, but a way for you to enjoy life. 9. You're friends. Great couples share common interests, enjoy hanging out together, and making each other laugh. Just like best friends, healthy couples can talk about anything and confide in each other without fear of judgment. It's important to feel comfortable with your partner. 10. You make decisions together. Healthy relationships aren't a power struggle. They are a partnership that allows both individuals to have equal say. If you disagree on which restaurant to go to for your date, one of you may have to give in, but next weekend, the choice should be yours. Compromise is key. 11. You get intimate. Yes, sex is extremely beneficial in healthy relationships, but so is intimacy. Intimacy can be bonding, sexually or otherwise, familiarity or romance. Maintaining a healthy relationship means courting your partner with affection, quality time, gift-giving, or other forms of love language. 12. Lastly, you make each other better. Fixing is not the same as supporting. Healthy relationships consist of couples that love one another for who they are, not who they want them to be. Are there items on this list that you and your partner practice regularly? Let us know in the comments below.
Sorry, just one moment. Okay. Let me just make sure that that video stops. Sorry, folks. All right, I'm back. Just wanted to make sure it didn't pop up in the background. All right, we're back to have a look at our slides here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we might see in an unhealthy relationship, what that looks like, and what we might experience in an unhealthy relationship. So in an unhealthy relationship, you believe that one person has more rights than the other, or that somehow one person's rights are more important than the other person's rights. You yell when you're angry at them, and we talked about the importance of communicating about our feelings in a relationship and what the reasons that makes it important. So if we're choosing to yell, then we're not communicating effectively. What we really want to do is try to aim for that calm, effective communication. Or you use the silence treatment. A lot of people can relate to this. And when I ask, why do people use the silent treatment? Why do people think that that works? And sometimes people will say, well, the person knows that I'm mad at them, or they come and apologize. So of course, in that situation, it's a form of manipulation so that the person that's using the silent treatment feels like they're getting what they want. Meanwhile, this is the opposite of what we want. So in order to work through conflict or avoid conflict, that communication is important. So if we're choosing to be silent, if we're ignoring the other person, then we're doing the opposite and nothing is really being resolved. Both people are not going to feel good and feel satisfied in that situation. And sometimes people say, well, the silent treatment is good because you're taking some time to calm down, which to me is different. So if we're taking some time, get some space, decompress and process what's going on and make a commitment coming back and talking about it, that's something a little bit different. That's a healthy way of dealing with conflict. But using the silent treatment is something different if we haven't made that commitment to come back and to communicate about what's going on. You pester or bug them until you get what you want in an unhealthy relationship. You pout so they feel sorry for you and give in to get what you want in an unhealthy relationship. So those are some of the things that we might see. And it's important to know the signals, to know the warning signs of an unhealthy relationship. So some of the warning signs, some of the signals in an unhealthy relationship might be that you control the person's relationships, friends, and activities. So in a healthy relationship, we get to decide for ourselves. We get to have our own free will and our own opinions. So this would be something to look out for. Someone that is telling the other person where they should go, who they should hang out with, how they should dress, that sort of thing. You put them down or call them names. So this is an interesting one because it seems like, yeah, of course that would be unhealthy. However, what if the person is saying, come on, it was just a joke, like, can you take a joke? And then you might ask yourself, well, maybe I should think that that's funny. Should I have an issue with that? And the reality is, especially if this person is doing this around other people, that can be embarrassing. It can still be hurtful. It can still offend you. And you don't have to be okay with that. So it is important to realize that in a healthy relationship, person talks to you and about you with respect, no matter who's around. And, you shouldn't have to accept that. So that happens. I mean, no one's perfect. Maybe the person says something that does offend you. You could try to take that person aside at a time when you can have a private conversation and let them know, hey, that actually hurt my feelings. That actually embarrassed me. I'd like it if you didn't do that again. And in a healthy relationship, the person would say, oh gosh, I'm sorry. I really didn't realize. Okay, I won't do that again. But if they continue to do it, despite you letting them know how you feel, that is definitely a warning sign because that person is not respecting your feelings and not speaking to you and about you with respect. And that is definitely a warning sign. You threaten harm. So we often think about abuse or physical, assault in terms of physical harm, but it's important to realize that if you threaten harm in a relationship, that also is a warning sign. It's unacceptable, and the person can actually be charged for doing that, for threatening harm or using threats, verbal threats. And it's not something that we ever have to accept in our relationships. Or you intimidate by hitting or destroying a person's property. So maybe you take the person's phone and you throw it down on the ground, trying to smash it. So any type of intimidation, any type of damaging someone's property is also a warning sign and not acceptable in a healthy relationship. What's important to remember there is that in a healthy relationship, we should feel safe and want the other person to feel safe. Another warning sign that we'd be looking out for is if you become very jealous and possessive of that person. And sometimes when I do these presentations and I talk about jealousy, sort of especially with younger youth, the idea of jealousy, people are sort of on the fence about it sometimes. Like, well, it can be okay. It can show us that the person really cares about us. I've had someone say, well, it depends, like, was it cute, jealous? And I think sometimes when the person in our life is jealous, we can feel flattered. We can feel like this is a way to know that they really care about us. Sometimes people will say, well, they're being protective. So sometimes we might construe that as being the person trying to protect us. But what's important is to dig deeper here and say, what are some of the reasons that people feel jealous? What can cause that? And if we really look at, someone, so if we think about someone that feels jealous a lot, what can really be going on there? And it's possible, first of all, that can show us that there's not a lot of trust or maturity in that relationship, but also that maybe that person feels insecure about themselves. Maybe deep down, they don't really believe that we would choose them first. It can be really hard to have a healthy relationship with someone like that. What it does show us is that they're insecure, perhaps, and that they don't trust us. So it's important to realize there's lots of different ways that we can show someone that we care about them. A lot of the things that we talked about, the qualities of a healthy relationship, and jealousy is not to be mistaken for genuine care and concern. That person is not trying to protect us, they're trying to perhaps control us. And that is something quite different. Also, if we look at the idea of possessiveness, the word possessive is kind of like possession. So that person is treating us like something that they own, that we have to answer to them. And that is not part of a healthy relationship either, because that is a form of trying to control in a relationship. And speaking of that, I also sometimes speak about the idea of someone calling you every day and whether or not that's healthy. And some people really like that type of regular contact. They really need that to feel connected to that person. But it's important to differentiate that if the person is calling or texting many times a day and wanting to know where you are and who you're with, they could be trying to control you as well. So that is something to watch out for and communicate about, and to sort of ensure that the two of you are on the same page, or at least can meet in the middle in terms of what's enough and what's too much and what the intentions are. So I wanted to mention that as well. And we actually are going to be watching another short video about friendships, boundaries, and how technology plays into that. So that sort of ties in as well. So you push, hit, restrain, or hold them against their will as a warning sign. So we often think about something like hitting, but it's important to realize that things like pushing, slapping, choking, holding against a wall, not letting someone leave the room, those things are also unacceptable. Those things are also warning signs and also against the law. There's lots of different consequences for that. If we choose to do that in a relationship, we can end up in trouble with the law, have a criminal record, have a hard time getting employment or a place to live, lose relationships in our lives, lose a relationship with this person that we supposedly care about, etc. So, and also another thing is forcing sexual touching or intercourse. So if I were to ask you, how do you know that the person that you are with is okay with being touched? How do we know that they like what's going on? And, sort of think to yourself, how do you know? And that's when the idea of consent comes up. So I've talked about this in a classroom when someone said, well, you watch their body language. And of course, that's not the same as getting consent. And used to say no means no. So if the person says no, we know that we don't proceed. But then we realize, that's really not good enough. That's not consent. That's not sufficient enough for us to know that the person is okay with what we're doing, that they're on board with what we're doing. So we started saying yes means yes. So we've got to hear yes in order to know that the person is consenting. And how do we know that the person is consenting? We ask them. And I think too many times we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it in advance. We don't talk about it in the moment, and we make assumptions. So there's a lot of different situations where a person can't or won't or don't say no, even though that's what they want to say. And we can probably think of lots of different situations where that could be the case. The person doesn't feel safe. Say no. They're worried about their safety. They don't say no because they're scared about the consequences, whether that's safety or losing that relationship. They're worried about rejection, worried about what people will say. And some of the reasons that people can't say no might be if they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, maybe they're not even conscious. So there's lots of different reasons that a person might not say no, even though that's what they want to say. So that's why we say yes means yes. And it is important that we communicate about those things, that we make up our mind about those things in advance to know how we feel about it. And we communicate that with our partner, and that we also check in with our partner regularly to make sure that they're okay with what's happening. Also to realize that just because we said yes once doesn't mean that the answer is always yes. We can always say no. We can always change our mind and communicate that with our partner. So it's important to realize also, which I'm sure you do realize, that forcing sexual touching or intercourse is also against the law. You can be charged, have a criminal record, not be able to get employment, lose relationships in your life, lose that person from your life, all of those other important things, if that's something that you should do. Okay. So I think before we go on to this slide, we're going to watch a little video, as I mentioned. And this one's teen voices, but I think this is really applicable to friendships at any age. What's happening behind the scenes? Okay. Let me just cue this up here for a moment. My apologies. Just a little bit slow at my end.
My favorite platform is usually Instagram.
Probably Snapchat and regular iMessage on iPhones.
We text a lot.
Texting, text message, text or group chat with my friends.
Group text messages.
Facebook Messenger.
They're always on it. I'm always with my friends, but when I'm not with them, I'm always talking to them on social media.
I definitely say sometimes it's beneficial because you go home and you might have had an argument with your sibling or your mom and you just need to talk to your friend, or you might need help with homework or something.
Being able to always be just like a phone call or text message away from each other allows us to kind of establish a relationship that's closer.
Reaching out to the person right when you need them, so that you don't have to wait until you see them at school to talk to them. That definitely brings us closer.
Texting is like the easier alternative. Take out your phone and communicate with someone.
There are definitely things that maybe I wouldn't tell anyone in real life that I feel more comfortable telling them on social media or online, because it's not the same as saying it to someone's face as it is to text it.
I know that my friends, or not even just my friends, but my family or anybody I can talk to, I know that they are available to me.
Yeah, I never really feel depressed or anything like that, just because there's always somebody to talk to and always somebody that's there for you. That's kind of a good thing about social media.
I could not imagine what it would be like if I couldn't contact them so quickly. Our lives are so integrated with social media and contacting other people that I don't think I could imagine not contacting them.
There can be an invasion of space and privacy over not just social media, but all forms of modern technology. We have each other's location 24/7.
Yes, there's been people that have contacted me for multiple times that have just been constant and annoying, that have just gone on my nerves.
If there's someone that is constantly reaching out to you and you don't want that person to be contacting you, that can be irritating and it's kind of a hassle.
I got my phone taken away from my friend texting me too much. I had to turn it off completely. Like, I had to turn it off when I was in class because it just started making so much noise.
I've had a friend who's contacted me way too much, and one of the downsides is that I kind of avoid that friend in real life and at school, so they feel a little neglected and it kind of hinders our friendship.
There's kind of like a pressure that like if one of us doesn't like respond or like keep texting, we're gonna like not talk again.
I've had a friend contact me too much to the point where I've asked them to give me some boundaries and some space. I would usually tell them in a respectful manner.
Over text, you either like just flat out say it or you kind of ghost them.
I used to have a friendship where we would text nonstop, like we would get to the point where we get irritated with one another. That was like nonstop, like, where you at, where you at, where you at, what are you doing, why are you not hanging out with me, why are you not that? It got to the point where like, leave me alone.
Oof. Like sometimes we could be like too much part of each other's lives, and it's not really good because we're kind of taken away from our own lives because we're constantly looking at theirs.
In the beginning, some people don't understand boundaries. I would have to constantly communicate to them that I have my boundaries even through online, through social media. I don't find it as much as a problem because I've practiced it and I've learned to get better at it.
I do believe that technology leads to boundary issues. I feel like technology has created a sense of a really tight-knitted community, but in a way it's too tight.
I feel that when we have conversations online, it kind of takes away the magic from talking face to face.
It definitely can get a little overwhelming, and it makes it difficult to hold conversations in real life because you talk about everything over social media or through your phones. And then if we do talk about something, it's normally like social media related, or we have to like pull out our phones to talk about it, so you don't really get to be in the moment with your friend because you're on your phone.
Okay, so hopefully you could hear that okay. I know it was a little laggy with visuals, but I think we could all get sort of some of the main points from there. Okay. Let me just take care of this. Okay. Okay. Hopefully I have successfully gotten rid of that. Okay, sorry. All right, so in terms of that video, some of the things that I thought was interesting, or some of the things that stuck out for me it was interesting to hear some of the young people talking about some of the ways that their boundaries had been kind of crossed through friends and technology, and sort of being constantly available to people, but also that they had learned these different ways to communicate about their boundaries, or to set boundaries, and to set limits in terms of this. And also the idea that sometimes we can get caught up in our device when we're there in person with someone, so much so that we're not present. And it is important to remember to be present in our relationships in the moment. So those were some interesting points that I thought there. So I'm just going to come back to the slides here. And talk a little bit about relationships and technology. So I'm sure that we can all agree that these days relationships and our technology are very much intertwined. It's like what we just heard in this video. And if I think back to when I was younger, before I had a phone, and even before the internet was just coming in, the only way that I really had to communicate with my friends was to see them in person, or be on the phone and sort of tie up the phone line so that no one else can use it. Those were different things, but interesting to think about how technology, the sort of influx of all of this technology, how this might have changed relationships. So if we think about that, change how we navigate relationships, maybe we can all think of something like maybe we know someone who's been broken up with by text message or some other form of digital communication. And we might ask ourselves, why would someone choose to do something so personal using technology? And sometimes when I pose that question, people will say, well, it's easier. And the question is, why is that easier? And I think the answer is that we don't have to see the tear rolling down that person's cheek if we send them a text message. We don't have to hear the hurt in their voice. And that, makes us feel like this is easier. I think it also gives us the illusion that we don't need to take responsibility for the things that we're doing in our relationships. Don't have to take responsibility or be accountable for how we're treating people. And of course, that has people doing and saying things that they wouldn't normally do in person. And it's important to realize that there is a person at the other end of the device, that we should deal with things in person when possible, as long as we feel safe doing so, so that we are, conducting ourselves in a responsible way, a healthy way in our relationships. And you can see here the lists of the different ways now that we have to communicate with those people in our lives. Things like, all those options on the internet, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, video chats, FaceTime. So just so many options. And it also brings up the issue of sexting, which of course is sending explicit or personal, intimate pictures, have intimate discussions, or even sending videos. So this is the idea of sexting, and maybe we can think of people that we know that have done this. And it's important to take a moment and ask, does this come with a risk? And what are some of those risks? And from being in the schools, there's a term that I learned, which is to expose someone, where you intentionally expose them by sharing these intimate discussions or pictures. And it is important before sending something like that to stand back and ask, is this something that I would want my grandmother to see or my whole community to see? And if the answer is no, then you shouldn't send it. That's a good rule of thumb. And sometimes in that moment, we might feel like, well, this is someone that I can really trust. This is my boyfriend, or this is my girlfriend, or this is someone that would never do this to me. But you just don't know what the future would hold. And once you send it, you've lost control of it. Nothing is ever really deleted or from cyberspace. You don't want that to be able to be pulled up years later. So remember to think before hitting send, and never send messages that you wouldn't want everyone to see. And that can be also other things like oversharing, maybe sharing too much about your private life. Maybe that's posting something that is unkind. So it's important, no matter what it is, that we take a moment to think before we post or hit send. That's just a little bit about relationships and technology. And I think that's the end for the slides. Hopefully you have learned a bit today about building healthier relationships, about how to recognize healthy versus unhealthy signs in a relationship. And it's important also to remember that just because we see some unhealthy signs in a relationship, it doesn't mean it's an unhealthy relationship. That's why we need things like communication, building trust, compromise, conflict resolution. That's why we need all of those things in order to help us build those healthier relationships. We can always talk to the person about those things, take accountability for the part that we played in a sort of conflict, and continue trying to make those relationships even healthier. And if we're finding that there's lots of unhealthy signs. If we're finding that addressing these things isn't seeming to help, the person isn't willing to work with us on this, then it is okay to ask ourselves if it's a relationship that we need to have in our lives. And sometimes we need to let those relationships go. So if you do find that you need some support, you have questions about healthy relationships, there are lots of helpers out there, lots of people or places that we can turn to for support, including, friends and family. Our social support system are a great source of support for us. But it's also important to realize that those folks may not be able to give us the help that we need. They're not likely professionals, and they may not know exactly how to support us. So it's important to build that professional support network as well. And that could include a therapist. So maybe we can access a therapist at school, through our post-secondary institution. We can access that at an agency like Carea Community Health Centre, or other agencies in the community that offer therapy and counseling services. We can get support through talking to our family doctor, who can support us, but also point us in the right direction, give us some referrals for someplace else that we can go. And a lot of those options are covered by OHIP if perhaps finances are a barrier. We can call the Kids Help Phone, which doesn't just help kids. So they have a website, online chat. You can even text through the Kids Help Phone. And if we're not in the age range for that, we can always reach out to Distress Center Durham, which is also an anonymous phone line that's available around the clock. So that's the distress line. We can also call the Pride line if that applies to us, if we identify as being from the 2S LGBTQI community. And there are lots of different places and people that we can turn to. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you learned some new things. I hope it was food for thought. And I very much enjoyed meeting with you today.
Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing such valuable information with us. I know initially when you hear healthy relationships, you think about partner relationships, but I really like how this can apply to other relationships in people's lives, such as family, friendship, work. So that's great. So thank you all for joining us. I hope everyone enjoyed today's program, and I wish everyone a wonderful rest of their day.